Greetings, YouTube. So saw an article in a couple of different locations, so I'm fairly sure that it is in fact a legitimate piece of news. And that is a bill being proposed in the state of Utah, which would ban pride flags, the classic rainbow flag, from public buildings, schools, libraries, courthouses, yada yada yada. But allow, for the purposes of education, Confederate flags and Nazi flags. Now, I have no idea if this is going to go anywhere. I have no idea if the Mormon folks over there are actually that self-absorbed, if they have fallen down their own navels deep enough to not understand how deeply twisted and warped of a law like that would be. Um, but I think this falls into the category of the term homophobia, because a lot of people say that homophobia isn't the perfect term because it implies fear. And they'll say, "Oh, these folks I'm not afraid of people, yada yada yada." They don't fear the queer community; that they just hate them. But I think this is an instance where I can say with some assurity that they're scared of that pride flag, because that pride flag represents something they can't control. That pride flag represents something that is beyond their experience, or at least they think it's beyond their experience. Because I think they would be shocked if they were to actually get an honest opinion from their citizenry just how many people in the state of Utah fall outside the definitions of straight and cisgender. Because sexual orientation is a spectrum, as is gender. And if people were allowed to express themselves the way they wished without social conformity, imposing itself unwanted, I think everyone would be shocked to see how many folks would play with the idea of what their orientation and their gender expression are. I'm not saying they would necessarily start adopting different pronouns, but I think that they would very much be able to play with gender roles and gender attire because they're very much is gendered clothing in our culture. Let's face it. I don't. I wear pants. I wear jeans to work, and when I'm not at work, I wear cargo pants, military fatigues, things like that, because I like pockets when I'm not at work. I like having places I can stick gloves and tools and crap like that. Um, but those are very much considered to be masculine types of clothing. And I know people of all gender expressions that wear things like that because they are also folks that are like a practical kind of an outfit. So if I were to put on a skirt, even a kilt, that would probably be viewed as somewhat unusual by the folks that know me and by society at large because they've never seen me in such a thing. And seeing a person in a skirt or a kilt that is very obviously meeting the stereotypes of masculine, beard, clothing, whole 9 yards, would make some people nervous. Now that nervousness, that uncomfortable feeling they're going to get from that is going to be expressed often in derision, snide comments, anger, or potentially violence. But anger is usually born of frustration. So what are they frustrated with? I think it's important to remember that while the hate mongers are hate mongers, there are no questions asked. Their anger at the world around them, I think, is born out of an internal frustration. And I believe that that internal frustration is that their perception of the world and their perception of themselves and where they want the world to be, where they want themselves in in the world is in conflict. And so seeking validation, seeking some sense of community, seeking some sort of authority that will help sweep away all that confusion, all that frustration, they just automatically find themselves attracted to authoritarian figures. And unfortunately, authoritarian figures and historically have been those trying to get power. And they're willing to use any tool necessary. And hatred and bigotry and prejudice are really useful tools if you're trying to get power. It's really good method if you're going to vilify a group or a number of groups. So you can get all of your followers focused on vilifying them. And while they're busy vilifying those groups, you're behind the scenes pulling the levers and doing things that benefit you and those who are your direct cohort, while doing things that are detrimental to your followers, but who aren't noticing this stuff because they're busy out there hating the groups that they want to hate. So this has been a very broad discussion on this topic. I freely admit this. But I think it's important to remember that I really believe that at the core of this is fear born of frustration. Their conflict that they are living with how they think the world should work and how the world works, is causing this. And if they could be properly educated, and I think that is going to have to be something that was started when they're children. I don't think a lot of these folks can be educated now. I don't think we can re-educate redcaps. I really don't. Maybe there are some corner cases. Maybe there are some on the fringe that could be turned away from their path. I think by and large, though, uh, that they will continue to be who they are because they've always been bigots. They've always rather externalized their frustration into anger than face the frustration inside themselves. Red caps aren't good at introspection. If they were good at introspection, they wouldn't be red caps. And I pray that this law in Utah fails. So all we're going to know is time will tell. And it's depressing and it's sad, but it is what it is.